What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for this episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, tactics, ballistics, different platforms, use of force, all manner of gun and gun adjacent stuff the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you as host, and I'm blessed with relevant training and experience. If you want to know what that is, if this is your first rodeo here, go check out the show notes, bio, at least the cliff notes of it are in the show notes. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Let's get into today's episode. Now, there are a certain subset of people that love revolvers. And not because of their attributes, but because they just love revolvers. Whether their revolver loves them back is a different story, but they're just in love with revolvers. I'm under no illusion that I'm going to change their minds, because it's just an emotional thing. They just love revolvers. And I also sometimes still carry a revolver. I actually carried a revolver today, and I didn't plan this out, but I was going to get a haircut. My wife's out of town. Normally she cuts my hair. I normally carry a full-size fighting handgun, both for work and just daily life. And I'd advise you to do the same thing, but I was going to get my hair cut, which means I'd have to remove my outer garment. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that people that cut hair may be more liberal than the general population where I live. So I thought, okay, I will put a .357 Magnum in my pocket. It's not my go-to carry, but it's my go-to pocket carry, if I have to, which is rare. Sometimes it makes sense to carry a revolver, but I do it because it makes sense. I don't do it because I love the revolver. Some people love the revolver. I'm not here to tell you that you can't. I'm not here to tell you to break up with the revolver. What I'm here to do is give you some good dope. Data obtained in previous engagements. Some good numbers, some good solid numbers for those people that aren't emotionally invested in either platform, but they really want to look at the numbers. That said, your numbers may vary. They almost certainly will vary, but percentage-wise, ratio-wise, it should give you a pretty good idea. This episode was a long time in the making. It was made possible by a generous contribution of one of the patrons, Patrick, or as he's lovingly referred to as Starfish. He sent me a full-size fighting revolver to review. I've had them in the past. I don't currently own any. He sent one, and I've been using it a lot. Did a lot of testing with it. A lot of work went into this episode. A lot of cold days on the range. A lot of ammo. So I hope that you guys will glean from it. Alright, enough caveats. Let's talk about some useful information. I did testing in the Taurus. I did an entire review on the Taurus, although it hasn't been that long ago. Maybe I will put it out as a rerun. This Taurus kind of changed my mind on Tauruses. This is not the review of the Taurus. I did a whole other episode on that. You can probably find it. I've owned a lot of revolvers over the years. Ruger, Smith & Wesson. It's a good revolver. It's not got the fit and finish of a Smith & Wesson, but as far as a workhorse, as far as performance goes, it's a medium-framed 4-inch .357 Magnum /38 Special revolver. I tested it with both .357 Magnum and .38 Special. I tested it against 9mm. I tested it with .357 Magnums and .38 Specials against 9mm. I also tested some .22 just to give you some rough number ideas. It was all factory ammo. I wasn't using like powder puff loads in one or the other. I generally carry strong side hip, so I try to get a fairly comparable holster through all the platforms that I tested. If I'm being honest, I might have given the advantage to the revolver because I got like a really fast holster for that revolver. But all strong side hip, Kydex type. Kydex is a brand name like Jello, but like a hard plastic holster for each platform to give you an idea. And I have a bunch of tests that I ran, but one of the main ones that I run and one of my standards that I'll train and have trained over the years is moving to the left or right while drawing, getting 2 hits on a steel plate. The steel plate is 8 inches. The distance for these was 11 feet. Different steel targets have different safe distances. Make sure that your target is safe for you to shoot with your rounds at your distance. If you hurt yourself or somebody else, it's your fault. But that was the drill. And that's kind of double arms distance. The reason I do that, that's kind of the, if you don't know somebody, if somebody gets closer than that, that's kind of the distance where you're like, whoa, something's odd here. Where if somebody's, 12 feet away from you and talking, even if you don't know them, you're like, okay, I feel comfortable in this space. Different distances and different cultures, but you get the idea. A good defensive drill, because if you're getting shot at or shooting somebody, movement is a good idea. So while moving left or right, draw 2 hits. I only count it if it hit. 2 hits on the steel plate. Let's talk some numbers. Moving, drawing, 2 hits on the steel plate with a Taurus 38-357. And I didn't write whether it was moving right or moving to the left. It's just my fastest 2 hits. With a full-size fighting revolver and with 38 specials. 1.78 and 1.76. That's drawing, getting 2 hits on the steel plate in that amount of time. Now let's look at a gun that I train with a bunch, the SIG P322, which is a mid-size 22. You might think that's not fair. I'm doing it to give you an idea, right? And before you say it's not fair, wait till we get some of the other numbers. It's a very similar in feel and ergonomics to a fighting semi-auto handgun. That's why I have it. That's why I train with it. It has an optic. I turned the optic off for these first set of numbers, so it had an optic on top. I turned the reticle off, so there was no dot to use. Same drill, 1.28 and 1.10. Again, the numbers with the full-size fighting revolver, 1.78 and 1.76. With the P322, same drill, 1.28 and 1.10. When I turn the optic on, 1.14, 1.20. Now, let's look at what a lot of people say is like a good handgun. We'll put that on the table, but it's one of the standards. Glock 17, factory trigger, it's got night sights, but they're factory option night sight. Factory Glock 17 Gen 5. 1.48 and 1.38. Again, the Taurus, 1.78, 1.76. With the Glock, 1.48 and 1.38. With the SIG M17, one of my most commonly carried guns, 1.29 and 1.22. 1.29 and 1.22 versus the Revolver 1.78 and 1.76. I've got some more testing, but let's talk about these numbers. The draw is pretty much the same, right? I'm grabbing a gun strong side hip out of very comparable holsters. If anything, an edge to the Revolver. It's a fast holster that I got for the Revolver. Why is it slower? Because that's how physics works. With a double action, single action revolver, I either have to cock the hammer, which if I'm trying to go fast, I wouldn't recommend for defensive use. I'm not saying you can never do it, but I'm saying in general, you're going to shoot double action. I have to manually turn that cylinder to get that round aligned with the chamber by using physical force. Let's say, for argument's sake, 12 pounds of force. And length. Double action movement on a revolver is fairly long. That takes time. Fractions of a second, but time. That's one of your safety rules. Keep your finger off the trigger so your sights are aligned on target and you're ready to fire. When my sights get on that target, even if it's not a great sight picture, I can start pulling that trigger. Once I start pulling that trigger, the longer it takes me to get that shot off, the longer it takes to get 2 hits on target. Period. End of sentence. Double action trigger pulls are longer and heavier. Newsflash to probably nobody. And I don't care how fast you are. I don't care if you're... And this is not about the numbers per se, but Jerry Miculek is super fast with a revolver. He's crazy fast. Maybe the fastest man alive with a double-action revolver. He doesn't compete when he goes to semi-auto competitions with a revolver. He competes in a revolver division. I don't care how fast he shoots a revolver. He shoots a semi-auto faster. He just does. If that wasn't the case, he would just use the Smith & Wesson 686 or whatever all the time for all his competitions. He doesn't because he wants to win. He's sponsored, I think, right now by Smith & Wesson. When he goes and competes in a semi-auto division, he uses a semi-auto because a revolver is slower. Period. So for the first shot, it's slower, and for the second shot, I don't care how great you think 357 Magnum is, and it's a great cartridge. It's better round per round, but it's likely, go look at the numbers, go look at an alternate study of handgun stopping power, which was not done by me, it was done by somebody else, which is a big empirical study. The numbers aren't as big as you might think as far as difference between number of shots needed with a 357 and a 9mm. Now, I'm here to tell you that I think 357 Magnum is more effective round per round than your average 9mm. That said, it's still very likely you're going to need multiple shots. Again, for the full-size fighting revolver, well, let's just do an average because it's 178 and 176. That's super easy. 177 is your average to move, draw, get 2 hits on target. With the M17, you've got a 1.22 and a 1.29. So, rough average, 1.25. If you're trading hot rocks with a dude on the side of the road or in a room or in your house late at night, does that matter? Yeah, time is important. Gunfights are fast. They almost always happen quickly. Speed, surprise, and violence of action in an armed encounter is important. Now, accuracy is very important, but the revolver was no more accurate. In fact, I'd say I had more misses with the revolver. Why? Not because the revolver itself is less accurate. It's probably more accurate. But because when you're moving and it's a small target and you're trying to go fast, the more you have to do to make that gun go off, the more opportunity it has to move off of target. I'm no more accurate with the revolver, but I am slower. Quite a bit slower. Talking about the difference between 2 shots being a half second when gunfights are over in a few seconds. Just think about that. If you're not just all in on the revolver, emotionally invested, think about those numbers. And keep in mind, that was with 38 Special. I would say the average 38 Special is less effective than the average 9mm. You could argue with that, but let's just say they're even. Okay, it's slower. Now let's talk about what I consider the worst abomination given to American gunfighters in the last century. The Glock 22 and 40 Smith & Wesson. A garbage cartridge born out of government bureaucracy and pushed on American gunfighters. I, if you can't tell, really don't like the 40 Smith & Wesson. I can tolerate a Glock, but a 40 Smith & Wesson and a Glock makes me want to throw up in my mouth. I tested the 40 Smith & Wesson in a Glock. A Glock 22, factory stock, factory night sights. Same drill. 1.62, 1.63. The Glock 40, what I would consider one of the worst abominations. Don't compare it to like a high point in 40 or something else, but one of the worst abominations commonly used by professionals. It's still faster by quite a bit. So again, Glock 22 and 40, 1.62, 1.63. The Revolver, 178, 176. Now, I tested the Revolver with 357 Magnums, a factory load, hot load 357 Magnum, 125 grain. That's kind of like the creme de la creme. Like when you look at what has the most street cred, you might like a 158 or a 180 or whatever, but when you look at what has like the most street cred in law enforcement and defensive gun encounters in the 357, it's hard to argue that it's not the 125 grain of some brand, 125 grain load, defensive load. That's what I shot. This was pretty surprising. The numbers for that, the fastest 2 hits, 1.73 and 1.62. Now that 1.62, that might have been the fastest on that revolver for sure of the day with 2 hits, and everything went just perfect. In fact, I was going real fast and I happened to get 2 hits. That was like everything happening really, really well on that one. And I missed a lot trying to get that number. It's a fairly small target when you're moving. But here's the interesting thing. Those numbers are no worse. You said I went back with the 357 and gone real, or the 38 special and gone fast. Eventually I would have gotten a number like that with that. But here's the thing. With the 357 Magnum in a, listen here, in a full-size fighting revolver, all steel heavy, the thing is heavy. It's a heavy gun. It's the heaviest of all the testing. It's by far much heavier than any gun we've heretofore talked about in the testing. In a full-size fighting revolver, it didn't seem to really make a difference, as long as you're good at handling recoil, if you carry 38 Special or 357 Magnum. In a full-size, all-steel fighting revolver, in that case, you may as well carry 357 Magnum. Why is that the case? Because the trigger is so long and so heavy, I've already recovered from the recoil, and I'm still pulling the trigger. So the fact that the round is more powerful in this one case did not seem to slow me down at all. For me, if you were good at handling recoil, in this case with a really, really long, heavy trigger pull and a really heavy gun, it did not seem to slow me down at all with the 357 Magnum. So, if you're in a similar circumstance, not if you're carrying a Smith & Wesson J-frame, not if you're carrying a lighter revolver, not if you can't control recoil, but if all those boxes are checked, it might make sense to step up to a 357 Magnum instead of a 38 Special in a full-size heavy fighting revolver if you can shoot quickly and manage recoil well. But that was surprising. That was a full power 357 load. Now, again, those numbers 1.62, 1.73. Now let's look at what I would consider one of the worst common fighting handguns. Let's go to one of the best. My old STI, my old duty gun, STI 2011. I talked about the numbers with the 22. Well, the STI, same drill, same distance, 9mm, 1.15, 1.06. Again, the numbers of the full-size fighting revolver, 1.62 and 1.73. With the STI 2011, 1.15, 1.06. That's a huge chasm of a difference when fractions of a second is stopping you from getting shot in the face. That's well over a half a second in difference of 2 shots. That's a giant chasm in time difference. That's an eon when you're getting shot at. Alright, now let's talk about where these numbers matter and where they don't. If you are in a situation where you're going to shoot somebody and they don't even know you're going to shoot at them, which can happen, and you're legally and you're morally justified. For instance, somebody is trying to kill somebody else, not you, and there's a significant time delay in which they can kill that person, but it's still immediate, then that time doesn't really matter. If somebody is actively trying to kill you, stabbing you, shooting you, about to shoot you, that time really does matter. Now, let's talk about some differences in revolvers and semi-autos, and I've talked about this before, but I should probably mention it again. Revolvers, if you're talking about down and dirty CQB stuff, they can be shot while pressing the muzzle hard into an adversary. If you do that on a semi-auto, unless you know proper technique, and there are techniques to combat this, will not fire if you shove the muzzle hard into something. It will take it out of battery, which means it won't fire. That's a very niche scenario, but it's there. The majority of time you're going to want to be fast There are some scenarios where that will make a difference. Conversely, if somebody grabs the cylinder on your revolver and they have any kind of decent grip strength, you're not going to be able to fire that gun, not even once. If they grab the slide or slide to frame on your semi-auto, you're wrestling over it. A lot of fights end up on the ground. I'm not going to say all, but a lot. With the semi-auto, you can at least get one shot off. Now, it's probably not going to cycle, but you can get one round in them. So that's another difference. I think there are a significant amount of people out there that will tell you that revolvers are more reliable than semi-autos. I don't think that's been the case in 20 years. With the advent of really good semi-autos, I don't think that's the case anymore. In fact, I think it's, if anything, maybe the opposite. But I think it's a plain up fallacy unless you go with a really junk semi-auto. If you're going with a good proven semi-auto, I think it's not fair to say, or not honest to say, that a revolver is more reliable. I don't think that's the case. Revolvers do break all the time. Now, we haven't even begun to talk about reloads. Now, on a lot of civilian defensive encounters, the vast majority, you're not going to have to reload. But if you do, I don't think it's and I did a bunch of these tests and shot a bunch of ammo doing this as well. I think it will be a newsflash to nobody that the semi-auto is faster to reload. This is already getting about the average length of a lot of my newer episodes. So perhaps that'll be a part 2. The modern fighting revolver and how it stacks up. Maybe reloads, sights, other considerations, overall philosophy. Maybe that'll be in part 2. Not going to promise it. The schedule's pretty crazy right now. I'm not going to say when it will or won't come out. But if you like this content, if you want to support, if you want more of it, I don't take sponsors. I'm not getting paid by Taurus or Smith & Wesson or Colt or SIG or whoever. I try and give you guys honest numbers. Some of you may not like it, but hopefully you appreciate and respect the integrity. The only way to do that independently without taking sponsors, without taking bribes, is to step up and pay for it. Podcasts cost money. It costs money to just put the podcast out. I would appreciate it if you would show your appreciation by stepping up and becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. While you are scrolling down, like, subscribe, leave a review. Seriously consider becoming a patron. It's a really cool group of guys on there. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Just me. There's a lot of guys on there that know more about specific topics than I do. I don't pretend to know everything about everything. Only God knows everything about everything. But when you get a gathering of people together in ecclesia, iron sharpens iron, as the Bible says. We help each other out quite a bit, and I'm humbled to be a part of that. Community is just one of the things on Patreon. There's also Patreon insider-only content. A lot of this content and these numbers came out a long time ago. Again, this has been a long one in the making. So, consider it. I know this one might get some heat, some pushback, some feedback. That's fine. Again, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. Maybe you like these numbers, maybe you don't, but the numbers are the numbers. I try to do good practical defensive drill for the backbone of this. If I wanted to, I could probably skew the numbers in each direction. I could probably just dump and see who could get the fastest 20 rounds on a target at 5 yards, and the numbers would be way skewed in one direction. Could start with the hammer cocked and the gun pressed up against the head of the target, and the numbers would be negated. Right? I'm trying to do practical defensive drills for the numbers to give you guys some real data. Hopefully you appreciate it. Your tactical tip. Did a lot of trying to speed reload revolvers. Reload them very quickly. Now, I did it for speed with a speed loader. Speed loaders are kind of pain in the butt to carry. I don't know anybody that CCWs, even if they carry a revolver, I don't know anybody that CCWs moon clips or speed loaders on their belt in a pouch. I just don't. A lot of people that carry a revolver, if they carry a reload at all, they carry it on a speed strip. It can be quite a bit faster I learned this to give credit where credit is due. Grant Cunningham, defending yourself with a snub-nosed revolver. It can be quite a bit faster if you need a couple of rounds to just put 2 rounds in on a speed strip and get back in the fight than to try and load 6 rounds into a cylinder. You may not have that kind of time. So you don't always have to load 6 rounds if you're trying to get rounds in that gun and get back in the fight fast. So that's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. Since we already touched on it, your verse of the day, Proverb 27, verse 17, as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.